To this day, listening to Martin Luther King deliver his I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial is still so powerful to me. It sends chills all down my body. It really overwhelms me how truly powerful that speech really was. Even if I am just watching it from a screen, I could feel the energy. Martin Luther King Jr. was a well-known public speaker in the early 1960s. He was also a reverend. He wanted equality for black people, and he wanted black and whites to be treated the same. Segregation was still going on, and he wanted to change this. He wanted people to be treated equal no matter their race, religion, or sex. He mentioned slavery more than once and how it still has affected black people, even though slavery had been abolished for over almost 100 years. Black people were still being treated unfair. He also mentions the Declaration of Independence and how it mentions that all men and women would be granted unalienable rights of life. He wants to change the rights black people are still being depleted of. Even after the Declaration of Independence was signed, there was still so much injustice from people, even though things were supposed to change. Our nation was still segregated, different schools, buses, and stores for black and white people. He saw an opportunity to make a change for people of color. He wanted his children to be able to play with other white children, and people not to think anything of it. He also mentions the Emancipation Proclamation, which is another document that was supposedly signed to help blacks with their equal rights. It did not help because 100 years after this document was signed, segregation was still going on. Injustice was still happening all around, so Martin Luther King decided to take action. By listening to the tone of his voice, you could really see the determination that he had of wanting to make a change. He wanted things to go back to the way that God intended them to be. He also mentions how when they protested and marched, he wanted them to be kept peaceful. He didn't want them to be turned violent and have it be more aggressive than it needs to be. He saw that it needed to change, but he didn't want to use violence to do that. He mentions that he wanted to do this, but he needed other people's help and that he couldn't do this alone. He wanted other people to not just stand around and watch the injustice happen, but to take action, to do something and want to make a change like he did. He mentions not feeling satisfied with how everything is going and that he could not feel satisfied until things change. You could not be satisfied until justice and equality are granted to all people. His dream was not just to change things for the 1960s, but for the future men and women of America. The speech was an opportunity to voice his opinions and for people to listen and see what he had to say. He wanted to implement his ideas and make his dreams a reality. He wanted to normalize equality. He wanted people to stop treating black people like they were different. He wanted them to see them not just for their color of their skin, but who the person that they truly are. Black people were being punished for such a long time just because of their skin color, and oftentimes people they were just taught this. White people in the 1960s were just taught this from their past relatives. They were just taught this, so they didn't know any better. But people that weren't taught this and didn't grow up in that era, they saw this and they're like, something's not right here. We need to make a difference in this, and we want to change and have it be something different, and we don't want this to continue. There was truly strength in numbers because when people started wanting to help, the speech that he wrote helped pass the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The act outlaws the discrimination of any race, color, sex, national origin, and later sexual orientation. He saw how discrimination and racism was affecting all people of color and decided to do something about it. In doing so, he delivered a speech at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. that would later go down in history and would change the United States forever.